Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So, you know that incredibly frustrating feeling when you promise yourself you're finally going to get your life organized, only to completely fall back into your old routines just a few days later? Yeah, you are absolutely not alone in that. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating mechanics behind human behavior. We're going to see exactly how to build those incredible, lasting routines, and, just as importantly, how to break the destructive ones. We are completely demystifying the science of habit formation today. Okay, let's dive right into this.
I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. Why do we almost always quit our resolutions by like week 2? You sign up for the gym, you go hard, and then you just stop. Or maybe you had this awesome side hustle you were so hyped to launch at the start of the year, and it just never got off the ground. Be honest with yourself. How many times have you felt like you've got all the motivation in the world, but your actual execution just falls totally flat? I want to validate that struggle for you right now, because the problem isn't that you lack willpower. Actually, scratch that. Willpower has very little to do with it. The real problem is that your underlying system is broken.
So here's the roadmap we've mapped out for today's explainer. We're breaking this down from fundamental mindset shifts all the way to real-world compounding. We'll cover the power of 1%, systems over empty goals, the 3 layers of change, the 4 habit laws, habit stacking and tracking, and we'll wrap up with compounding growth, habits, and wealth.
All right, jumping right into section 1, the power of 1%. This is all about how small adjustments lead to massive destinations.
You see, we've basically been conditioned to believe that if we want massive goals, we need to take these huge, rocket-sized actions. But the truth is entirely different. Just consider this number, 3.5 degrees. Imagine you're a pilot sitting in the cockpit taking off from Mumbai, and your destination is Delhi. But right at takeoff, you shift the plane's nose a mere 3.5 degrees to the right. Now down on the runway, that's a tiny, maybe 90-inch deviation. Literally nobody on board would even feel it. But as that plane flies through the air, that microscopic shift compounds, and instead of landing in Delhi, you touch down in a completely different city, Jaipur. Well, your life works the exact same way. A tiny shift in your daily trajectory completely changes your ultimate destination.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the staggering mathematical reality behind getting just a tiny bit better. If you can manage to improve by just 1% every single day, you don't just become a little bit better by the end of the year. Thanks to the magic of compounding, you actually become 37 times better than when you started. No way, right? But the math checks out. Of course, the opposite is also true. If you decline by 1% daily, you slide all the way down to nearly 0. So massive results don't come from huge leaps. They come from this quiet, daily 1%.
The tricky part, and honestly the main frustration, is that early progress is virtually invisible. It's kind of like the Chinese bamboo tree. You plant the seed, water the soil, add fertilizer, make sure it gets sunlight, and for an entire year, absolutely nothing happens. 2 years, 3 years, up to 5 years, literally nothing visible above the ground. You'd probably think your effort was a total waste. But then, right after year 5, the tree sprouts and shoots up a staggering 90 feet in just 6 weeks. It wasn't just sitting there doing nothing for 5 years. It was building the massive, invisible root system it needed to sustain all that growth. The takeaway here, don't give up during your invisible phase.
Moving on to section 2, systems over empty goals. Because here's a secret. The winners and losers actually have the exact same goals.
This brings us to a really crucial pivot in how we understand success. Society absolutely loves to tell us to set these grand 5-year plans and New Year's resolutions. But goals alone are never going to cut it. Let's compare 2 people. Person A is super goal-oriented. They're obsessed with starting a business. They write it down, make vision boards, but then they get completely paralyzed by overthinking. What should the business be? How do I even start? They get stuck planning and never act. Then there's person B. Person B doesn't obsess over the final goal at all. Instead, they just build a simple system. Every day at 8 a.m., I'm going to research for 1 hour and take 1 actionable step. Person B is going to win every single time. Why? Because every Olympian wants the gold medal. The goal doesn't set them apart at all. This system does. You do not rise to the level of your goals, folks. You fall to the level of your systems.
That leads us nicely into section 3, the 3 layers of change. We're moving from surface outcomes down to your core identity.
So, if systems are the absolute key here, how do we actually rewire ourselves to stick to them? Well, lasting change isn't just about what you do. It's heavily tied to who you believe you are. Think of human behavior change kind of like an onion, and this brilliantly illustrates that. The outer layer is outcomes. This is results-focused, like saying, I want to lose 10 kilograms. Most people get stuck right here, and it's highly temporary. The middle layer is process. This is focusing on your routines, like hitting the gym every morning.
Better, for sure. But true sustainable success happens deep at the core layer, identity. You don't say, I'm trying to read more. You say, I am a reader. You're literally taking action to prove to yourself that you are a disciplined person. If you change that core belief, the outer habits just naturally follow.
All right, Section 4, the 4 habit laws. This is the actual anatomy of building the good habits and breaking the bad ones. Now that we've got our core identity sorted out, let's look at the actual mechanics. There is a precise, science-backed process running in the background of your brain that dictates literally every routine you have. Every single habit you perform goes through this exact 4-step loop. Step 1 is the cue. This is the trigger in your environment. Step 2 is the craving, which is that internal desire you feel for a change in state. Step 3 is the response, the actual action or habit you end up doing. And finally, Step 4 is the reward. That's the satisfaction that signals to your brain, hey, that felt good, let's remember this and do it again tomorrow. If you want to master your daily life, you absolutely have to master this loop.
So, the crucial point is how we actively manipulate these 4 steps to engineer our environment. Say you want to build a good habit. You make the cue obvious, like leaving your running shoes right next to your bed. You make it attractive, you make it easy, and you make it satisfying. But if there's a bad habit you're trying to break, you just flip the script and do the exact opposite. You make the cue invisible. Take the junk food and shove it to the very back of the fridge where you can't see it. Or better yet, just don't buy it at all. You make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. You're basically rigging your environment so that success is the path of least resistance.
Let's jump to Section 5, habit stacking and tracking. Here are some practical tools for your daily execution. So this is the tactical implementation phase. It's awesome to know the laws, but how do we apply them right now, today, without getting totally overwhelmed? First rule, we have to let go of perfection. There was this really famous photography experiment done at the University of Florida. A professor split his class into 2 groups. The quantity group was graded purely on taking 100 photos. It didn't matter if they were terrible or masterpieces, just hit 100. The quality group was graded on producing just 1 absolutely perfect photo. And guess who took the best photos at the end of the term? The quantity group, because while the quality group was sitting around theorizing and completely paralyzed by perfectionism, the quantity group was out there taking messy action. They were experimenting and naturally refining their skills. So start messy. Just focus on getting your reps in.
And one of the absolute best ways to get those early reps in is a formula from Stanford professor B.J. Fogg. He calls it habit stacking. The formula is beautifully simple. After I do my current habit, I will do my new habit. For instance, you could say, after I brush my teeth, which is something I literally already do every single day, I will sit and meditate for just 2 minutes. You don't even have to remember the new habit anymore because your old habit acts as an automatic built-in trigger. It creates this flawless domino effect right in the middle of your day.
Let's quickly summarize this practical toolkit. If you're struggling just to get started, use the 2-minute rule. Just commit to reading a single paragraph or literally just tying your gym shoes. That's it. It completely breaks that initial starting friction. Next, fill your physical environment with obvious visual cues. Track your progress where you can actually see it, like putting a giant calendar on your wall. Let me tell you, checking off that box is intensely satisfying for the human brain. And lastly, celebrate your small wins. Even if you feel totally ridiculous looking in the mirror and saying, awesome job today, that little verbal celebration is actively wiring the reward loop right into your brain.
Now for our final piece, Section 6, Compounding Growth, Habits and Wealth. We're looking at the plateau of latent potential.
So we've clearly seen how habits compound in our personal, daily routines, but it is fascinating to realize that this exact same principle applies universally, especially when we talk about financial growth and wealth building. The source text describes this as the plateau of latent potential. This is that agonizing lag period where all your hard, daily efforts or your early financial investments seem completely invisible. You're grinding, you're putting in the work, but nothing is happening. But then you cross this critical threshold. Suddenly, boom, you see this explosive, highly visible growth. To the outside world, you look like a total overnight success. But you know the real story. It's the result of years of invisible, stored-up potential finally breaking the surface.
And the source material actually points to the cryptocurrency market and platforms like CoinSwitch to perfectly illustrate this compounding effect. Just look at this timeline. When Bitcoin launched back in 2009, it was valued at merely 30 cents. For the first 5 years, those early adopters saw basically zero profit. It looked like a completely dead end. But they were just sitting in that plateau of latent potential. Once that threshold finally broke, the growth was explosive, with current valuations hitting some truly extraordinary highs.
So, whether you are trying to build a business, get into shape, or make long-term financial investments, that early, invisible patience is the absolute prerequisite for massive compounding returns down the line.
All right, bringing this all the way back to your personal daily journey. Because let's be real, life is going to get in the way. You will, inevitably, break your habit streak at some point. The key insight from the source here is this. If you miss a day, do not view it as a total failure. Instead, just cross it off your calendar and tell yourself that it was a day you lived on your own terms. Forgive yourself immediately. The golden rule you need to follow is simply this: never miss 2 days in a row. A single mistake is just a little blip on the radar. A second mistake, well, that's the start of a brand new, bad habit.
Let's move to wrap this up and see how all of this builds together. Here are your most critical takeaways from this explainer. True change always happens at the identity level. You are taking action to prove a new belief to yourself. Remember, robust systems will always outperform empty goals. Those tiny, seemingly invisible 1% improvements are quietly compounding into massive results behind the scenes. So, start with messy action, stack your new habits onto old ones, track them visually, and above all else, give yourself the grace to forgive your mistakes and just keep moving forward.
So I want to leave you with a direct provocation to think about. That 3.5-degree shift is sitting right there, waiting for you. You don't need to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow morning. You literally just need to nudge the steering wheel slightly. So ask yourself right now, which 1% habit are you going to start tomorrow? Don't overthink it. Pick one tiny, easy action, attach it to something you already do, and let that compounding begin. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Now get out there and start building those systems.